Begin in Russia today. Defense Ministry said that 8 of its long-range bombers flew over neutral waters in the Sea of Okhotsk and Sea of Japan. The aircraft provided air support to the forces of the Russian Pacific Fleet. The ministry also confirmed in an earlier statement that a Pacific Fleet task force, including a covert and smaller anti-submarine ships, held firing drills in the Sea of Japan yesterday. The drills are part of a snap review of the Russian forces in the Pacific ordered by President Vladimir Putin, which started on April 14 and is set to last until April the 22nd. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Mitsuno said Tokyo had lodged a protest with Russia over its military exercises around disputed islands near Japan's Hokkaido. Mr. Matsuno also said that Russia informed Tokyo that it will conduct missile exercises around the disputed islands between April 18 and 22nd. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has condemned the violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity by Russia and again called for mediation to end the war, a peace initiative that was criticized by the Ukrainian government. Speaking at a launch to Romanian President Klaus Iohannis, President Lula said a group of neutral nations must come together to help broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. He pitched himself as a peace broker to end the war, which began when Russia invaded the neighboring country in February 2022. His proposal, based on Brazil's tradition of non-intervention and neutrality, calls for a group of nations not involved in the war to engage both Russia and Ukraine in talks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged world leaders to adopt his 10-point peace plan, which, besides calling for the withdrawal of Russian troops and a cessation of hostilities, proposes restoring Ukraine's original borders with Russia. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said that Brazil's efforts to mediate in the conflict in Ukraine deserved attention, but it had not seen any plans for a peace deal presented by France. It comes as French President Emmanuel Macron was looking to approach China with a plan that could form the basis for talks between Moscow and Kiev. Asked about President Lula's suggestion, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters that any ideas that take account of Russia's interests deserve attention and certainly need to be listened to. Russia says it's open to talks, but has made clear these would only take place on its own terms. It says Ukraine must accept the new realities on the ground, specifically its annexation of 4 Ukrainian territories dismissed as illegal by Kiev and the West. Well, the U.S. government doesn't quite agree. The White House is critical of Brazil's stance, saying it's wrong to argue that the United States is encouraging the Ukraine war and its tone is not one of neutrality. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre rejected comments from Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, accusing the United States and the European Union of prolonging the conflict by supplying arms to the Ukrainians.
We were struck by the tone of the press conference of the foreign minister yesterday, which was not a tone of neutrality, suggesting that the United States and Europe are not interested in peace or that we share responsibility for the war. We believe, and it is true, that it is plainly wrong. Of course, we want this war to end. Of course we do. And we support President Zelensky's call for a just end to Russia's war of choice. And to say, and again, what we heard, the tone was not neutral, and it is not true. And so we'll continue to speak out against that, just like you heard from Admiral Kirby yesterday. I'll say this: we are confident in the strength of the U.S.-Brazil relationship, even if we disagree with some of the things that the President Lula said. We are still confident in that engagement, in that relationship.
More on the Ukraine war. The Kremlin has been reacting to South Korea's supply of military aid to Ukraine, saying it will mean that Seoul is becoming involved in the conflict to a certain extent. It comes as South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol confirmed that his country might extend its support for Ukraine beyond humanitarian and economic assistance if there was a large-scale attack on Ukrainian civilians. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says South Korea has taken an unfriendly position towards Russia over the conflict in Ukraine. And in the midst of this back and forth, a Russian artillery attack has hit a market in the city of Kherson, southern Ukraine, killing one person and injuring 9 more. Kherson Regional State Administration published a video purportedly to show a body on the ground and wounded people being treated by paramedics. Ukrainian troops recaptured Kherson last November after nearly 8 months of occupation by Russian forces who seized it soon after the start of this full-scale invasion. The area is now under frequent fire from Russian forces that are entrenched on the opposite side of the Dnieper River. Russia denies targeting civilians. Let's get more of this as we talk now to the VOA's Anna Chernikova, who joins us from Kyiv. Hello, Anna. Nice to have you with us today.
Good evening.
Right, so give us an update on the Russian artillery attack in the city of Kherson. Are the casualty figures the same? Have they changed?
Well, for the moment, we do not have any additional information in terms of casualties. So let's consider that the number has not changed yet. But unfortunately, as we already discussed this a couple of times, the city of Kherson remains in a very tough position in terms of its location because it's really it's an artillery distance for Russian forces who are located just in the on the other side of the river from the city, and the city is under constant attacks. And unfortunately, we see if we just follow the reports of the attacks, of the shelling, we can see that every day there is an air raid alarm, there is a certain risk of shooting, of the shelling, and there is shelling happening almost every day. And unfortunately, most of the attacks, as we also see the footage of the result of these attacks, most of the attacks are targeting civilian areas, either residential buildings or hospitals or bus stations and so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, the city of Kherson, even after the liberation, remains at a very hot spot, remains at the border, basically, at the front line, at the border of these controlled areas. And this is why, people continue to suffer because of these attacks, which are happening on the regular basis.
So what do you make of the U.S. Attorney General's role in bringing perpetrators of the war crimes in Ukraine to justice?
This is an extremely important news that came in just this Monday. Merrick Garland, United States Attorney General, announced basically two very important things. The appointment of a prosecutor to this International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, which is investigating and prosecuting war crimes and crimes of aggression by Russian Federation against Ukraine, but also the appointment of a legal advisor to the embassy of the U.S. in Kyiv to provide aid and assistance to the Ukrainian government. This creates, first of all, a very important case and precedent for this particular war crimes cases, and it's two important things here. First of all, it creates a credibility, or additional credibility, let's put it this way, for the whole body. This is a body that was created particularly for this war crimes investigation in Ukraine. And additionally, it creates a credibility for the fact of these war crimes. Why it is even, similarly important, because we hear from Ukrainian officials all the time about these war crimes happening. Ukrainian authorities invite basically welcome international leaders to these places of these atrocities and these war crimes. So Ukrainian authorities demonstrating this places so European leaders, not only European leaders, world leaders can see these places with their own eyes, and they can feel and they can see that this was really happening and what was really happening. Additionally, international investigation teams from different countries also working at that areas. And this is what we see from one side. From the other side, we see Russian Federation denying all this and saying that this is not true. And basically, this appointments basically create this additional credibility to the fact of this war crimes, meaning that there is investigation which is going to be happening, and that's meaning that there is war crimes to investigate. There are war crimes to investigate, and this would be definitely a very important strengthen of this group of countries and organizations, like of this body. For the moment, we know that there is also, except of you, so it's not only Ukraine, which is the part of this body, it's also International Criminal Court, and as well as such countries as Lithuania, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Slovakia, and Romania. So definitely, U.S. representation and representative would have a very important role, as well as, of course, we understand that this person would be located in The Hague, in the European Union Agency for Criminal Justice, and also he will provide access to the significant departmental resources, basically to respond to this war crimes and war situation in general.
Relatedly, Anna, the International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan has opened the Ukraine Accountability Conference in The Hague and has so far tallied 338 potential war crimes committed by Russia. I mean, one could consider this an act of terrorism?
Well, unfortunately, I think if we look at the description of what terrorism act is, in the vocabulary, in the justice books, acts against civilian, especially during the war, acts against civilian society and torture of the civilian society would probably be considered a terrorist act. Ukrainian authorities, President Zelensky himself, called this terrorist act. International community also use this term time to time, so we don't see it often. So some countries even voted to consider Russia as a sponsor of terrorism. So definitely this probably some of the cases. I'm not an investigator, so I don't want to give my personal view of this. Of course, when I see, for instance, children tortured and children killed, or when I see direct hits of the residential areas with 2-year-old children dying, of course, to me it looks like terrorist act. But again, we have to follow, the international law and international descriptions of such acts. But I think that it might be that this would be proven, because it's quite a high chance, because what was already announced, that what kind of crimes have been already under investigation, and what was announced that this would have further investigation, includes such crimes as tortures, mass graves. This includes deportation of children, and at least these 3 points already, might be the evidence of such acts. But I think that we will see, unfortunately, we will see much more because investigation might go much deeper, and I think it will go much deeper, and we will see really much more of those.
And just today, Anna, Ukrainian military said Russia launched 60 airstrikes in the past 24 hours as fierce fighting continues in eastern Ukraine, especially in and around the beleaguered eastern city of Bakhmut. There was also a strike in Kherson. One person died and several people, many more were injured. Give us a clearer picture of these atrocities.
The recent ones, so we definitely see a very tough shelling of basically of any area you can see in the city of Bakhmut. The city of Bakhmut is a great example of a huge atrocity that I would call just a vanishing of destruction of the whole city. So basically, the city is just destroyed. There is no building that would not be affected. There is no family that would not be affected in the city of Bakhmut. So this is a kind of we basically see that the city is just put into ground. It's nothing left. And unfortunately, this is not only happening in the city of Bakhmut. We saw the similar thing in Mariupol and in other cities in different areas, especially in those areas that were occupied and then liberated or remain occupied. Again, what we also see in Kherson, these attacks of the humanitarian teams, hospitals, humanitarian volunteer teams, right? So all these civilians, all this goes under these atrocities, under this list of acts which will be investigated. And if we look at the front line, just at this moment, we can see that the whole Donetsk region is basically under quite an intensified shelling, and this includes not only cities which are which have these street fights inside of the cities, like the city of Bakhmut or some other areas, but also those cities which are just artillery distance for Russian forces. And we see that something like the city of Avdiivka, for example, very tough situation there as well. The city of Mariinka. So this is really, unfortunately, what's happening. And also just this past night, it was another drone attack on the region of Odessa. And this is, again, another type of act. And we know that drones in total and 10 were shut down. However, there is a hit of the recreational infrastructure. So basically, this is the picture we have at the moment.
Right. Just a few minutes ago, I think I heard you mention, the children that were reunited with their families, some of those that have really suffered because of this invasion. Just last week, they were reunited with their families in Ukraine after, a long operation to bring them back home from Russia, where they had been taken from occupied areas during the war. Give us more on this. Are the children going through any kind of evaluation for trauma? What's the mood like in Ukraine? Families must be excited to have their children safe back in their arms, I must, imagine.
Yeah, for sure. It was a long-awaited reunion for these families, and these children were, basically they were deported without any, without any normal conditions. I mean, in general, we cannot talk about normal condition when we talk about deportation. So with this particular case, parents were told that children would be taken to certain recreation facility, and again, not all of the parents agreed, but this was kind of announced, and then Russian side just took these children and didn't want to bring them back. So when parents realized that they're not coming back, this became definitely the case. And this is not the only case, unfortunately. We know, we hear, and also both President Zelensky and also Ukrainian authorities, responsible authorities for such cases, documented and reported on such deportations from the occupied areas. We talk about Mariupol, the city of Mariupol and surroundings. We talk about those areas in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, which are currently under Russian occupation. It was happening in the Kharkiv region as well. So basically, this particular case, children, it was a very difficult, according again to the authorities who were responsible for this from the Ukrainian side. They say that it was very difficult operation. It took quite a long time and quite a lot of effort to make sure that it would be agreed to by the Russian side to give these children back. And what children are telling, there were already some interviews taken, because of course children are under the treatment now. They are working with therapists and psychiatrists, because of course it was not only physically, it was difficult for children, but it was also mentally very difficult. What children are telling, that there were a lot of mental pressure on them. So they were told that their families don't want them anymore, their parents don't need them anymore. They will be here because it's no one who is waiting for them back home, and basically they have no home. So this is kind of things that this is what we get from what children are telling. Of course, there is not much yet, because again, investigation is ongoing, and there is work. Medical staff is working with these children first of all, but for the moment, like physically, they seem okay. Mentally, is more difficult story and more difficult question, and unfortunately, the consequences for the moment are unknown. But these consequences we might see in the future, because these children will have to deal with that.
Well, I must say it's a horrible thing for children to be affected in such a manner, being away from their families for so long. You did say that currently they're going through, some kind of evaluation therapy for trauma. It must have been frightening for them. I do certainly hope they do get over this. And of course, most of them, it may stay with them for a long time. Anna, thank you for updates on all these issues, and please continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Let's move on quickly. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is expected to discuss the Ukraine Black Sea grain export deal with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in New York next week, just weeks before the pact could expire unless Russia demands regarding its own exports are met. Mr. Lavrov is due to chair 2 UN Security Council meetings as Moscow holds the presidency of the 15-member body till the end of the month. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric says the UN is determined to have the grain deal implemented fully. Welcome back to the program. Poland has agreed to lift a ban on the transit of Ukrainian grain and food products after 2 days of talks in Warsaw produced a breakthrough. EU member states Poland, Hungary and Slovakia have imposed import bans to protect their markets from an influx of cheaper supply following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and Warsaw banned their transit through Poland at the weekend. Polish Agriculture Minister Robert Telus says shipments of Ukrainian grain would be allowed to transit through Poland again, with shipments to be monitored and sealed. The deal is expected to go into effect at midnight on Friday. Ukrainian First Deputy Prime Minister said that she was confident Ukrainian exporters would respect the terms of the deal agreed with Poland. And teams from NATO's nations and partners trained to defend against coordinated cyber attacks in the annual Locked Shields exercise. The exercise in Tallinn is organized by NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence based in Estonia, which offers training and research to NATO members and partner countries. Director at the center, Mart Numa, says awareness of cyber attacks sponsored by countries like Russia had increased, and such attacks were actively used against democratic nations. The exercise consisted of a wide-ranging attack on the fictional island nation of Berlia from its neighbor, Crimsonia, with critical infrastructure, communications networks, and financial systems being targeted.
In 2023, we can say that the masks have fallen down. That means this is no secret anymore that countries like Russia, they sponsored massive cyber attacks against other nations. And this is something that, that happened before, but people didn't really understood or realized, and it was kind of hidden, not anymore. So we can see that cyber is really the new warfighting domain, which is actively used against democratic nations.
This is a controlled environment, which is built a technical environment and additionally an information environment where nations and their specialists can actually join in virtually to form teams, and they can use this platform to prone their skills in the respective areas of whether it be defending a air defense system, or is it a general IT system, or is it actually communications when it comes to cyber incidents, when we have legal questions in cyber domain. So various experts come together in a joint environment to train and prone their skills. Of course, all of the systems have been updated, but when we want to highlight maybe something, then we're definitely seeing the trend of information environment affecting our everyday life. Attacks and defenses are not 1 and 0. It's not just now it's been attacked. It's a long chain of events, even social manipulation, which in the end can become a really serious issue in a cyber world as well. So what we're seeing is how the information actually affects us. So information environment within the technical environment is very important. And this year we've also introduced a gas plant, which is also highly important when we look at the geopolitical situation.